It was my junior year in high school, and I'd been through a few lockdowns before. Mostly drills where we just sat in the corner with the lights off whispering dumb jokes to pass the time. But this one, it was the scariest thing I'd ever gone through. Even though it turned out to be the most pointless waste of everyone's nerves, I still get chills thinking about it, like my brain won't let go of the what-if part. I was in my history class doodling in my notebook, while the teacher droned on about World War II. There were about 20 of us in the room, a mix of kids I knew and some I didn't. The classroom was located on the first floor with large windows facing the parking lot, but the blinds were partially drawn because it was a sunny day outside. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life. It was Mrs. Jenkins, the receptionist, who was the only one who knew how to work that ancient system properly. Her voice was shaky, not like the calm drill announcements. "Attention, this is a lockdown. This is not a drill. Lock doors, turn off lights and hide now." Panic hit like a wave. Everyone froze for a second. Then it was chaos. Kids dove under desks, some crammed into the coat closet at the back. The teacher, Mr. Harland, rushed to the door, locked it, and flipped the lights off. He whispered harshly for us to stay quiet and get out of sight. I was near the middle of the room, so I dropped to the floor and started crawling. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. What was going on? Was there a shooter? A bomb threat? We'd had those active shooter trainings, the ones where they show videos of kids running and hiding, and it always felt fake until now. I made it to the teacher's desk up front. It seemed safer, a big wooden thing with drawers and space underneath. Mr. Harland was on the other side of the room, helping shove kids behind a bookshelf. I squeezed under the desk, pulling my backpack in with me. That's when I noticed the mini fridge tucked in the corner, humming softly. Curiosity got me. I cracked it open just a bit. Inside were a few cans of Diet Pepsi, Mr. Harland's secret stash. He was always sipping one during lunch. I don't know why, but in that moment I grabbed one. Maybe nerves or just something normal to hold on to. I popped it open quietly and took a sip. The fizz helped calm my shaking hands a little. We all went dead silent. Then, through the small window in the door, I saw a shadow pass by. It was a person, no doubt tall, moving slowly. My stomach dropped. The doorknob rattled. Someone was trying to get in. They twisted it back and forth hard for what felt like forever, probably 30 seconds, but it stretched out like hours. I held my breath, clutching that stupid soda can. Was this the intruder? Why were they testing our door? The rattling stopped and the shadow moved on. I exhaled slowly, but my mind was racing. What if they came back with a key or broke the window? We stayed like that, huddled in the dark. I could hear someone sniffling quietly across the room. Mr. Harland was on his phone, typing furiously, probably emailing the office or something. The air felt thick, like we were all waiting for gunshots or screams from the hallway. I'd seen news stories about school shootings, kids my age hiding just like this, texting goodbye to their parents. I pulled out my phone, the screen dimmed all the way, and I thought about messaging my mom. But what would I say? Love you in case. Finally, the school's bell rang, the automated one for the end of the day. It was so loud and normal, it almost made me jump. Kids shifted a bit, whispering if that meant it was over. A few minutes later, the intercom buzzed again. Mrs. Jenkins, the campus is secure. Lockdown is lifted. Resume normal activities. Relief washed over everyone. We started standing up, grabbing our stuff. I chugged the rest of the Diet Pepsi and shoved the empty can in my bag. Didn't want Mr. Harland to notice. I was halfway to the door when the intercom crackled once more. Lockdown initiated. This is not a drill. Hide immediately. What the hell? I dove back under a desk, cursing under my breath. Everyone scrambled again, more frantic this time. Why, another one so soon? Was the first announcement a mistake, or did something new happen? We hit again. Lights off, door locked, minutes dragged. Then the doorknob rattled again. Same twisting persistent. Mr. Harland looked terrified now. He was texting like crazy, probably to his family. I could see his face in the glow of his phone, pale, eyes wide. Whispers rippled. Is that the same person? What if they shoot through the door? My phone buzzed. A text from a friend in another class. Heard there are cops outside. Stay safe. That made it worse. Cops for what? After what felt like eternity, maybe 15 minutes, the intercom finally said it was over. We could go home. We filed out cautiously, hallways buzzing with kids comparing stories. No one knew what happened. I grabbed my bike from the rack and pedaled home fast, adrenaline still pumping. That night I barely slept, replaying the door rattles in my head. The next morning, during homeroom, the principal came on the intercom. His voice was calm, almost embarrassed. I know yesterday was frightening for everyone. Let me explain what happened. I saw a police car pull into our parking lot. As a precaution, I called the lockdown. I walked over to talk to the officer. He rolled down his window. He was just eating his McDonald's lunch. Said he needed a quiet spot to stop and eat. No emergency. I canceled the lockdown right away. He paused, then added, but then the assistant principal started checking doors to make sure they were locked properly during the drill phase. He was the one turning the knobs. It was all a misunderstanding. We're reviewing procedures to avoid this in the future. The class erupted in groans and laughs. Pointless, yeah. The cop was chowing down on a Big Mac while we thought we were about to die. The assistant principal was just doing his job, but his shadow and that endless rattling terrifying. I felt drained, like all that fear had nowhere to go. After school, I just went home and crashed, sleeping for hours. It happened when I was 16 during my junior year at a small suburban high school. We had been through dozens of fire drills and a handful of lockdown drills. Most of us treated them like a break from class, whispering jokes in the dark and waiting for the announcement to end. But one Thursday afternoon, the lockdown wasn't a drill. I was in history class when the intercom came on. Lockdown, this is not a drill. Teachers, secure your rooms. The teacher quickly shut off the lights, locked the door, and pulled us into the corner. The usual nervous giggles weren't there this time. Everyone's face turned pale. We'd all heard rumors of nearby threats before, but this was the first time it felt real. After a few tense minutes, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hall. A teacher hissed that we needed to move deeper inside the building, away from the glass windows. That's how a group of us, 6 students total, ended up in the basement, hiding in the boiler room. It smelled like dust and old metal, and the pipes clicked constantly, as if reminding us we weren't alone. The heavy doors shut behind us, and we tried to stay quiet. At first, it felt safer than the classrooms. No windows, no easy way in, but as the minutes turned into hours, silence from above pressed down on us. No updates, no announcement telling us it was over. Just waiting in the dark. Then we realized we weren't alone. At the far end of the boiler room, where pipes disappeared into the walls, we heard a scrape like metal against concrete. At first, I thought it was just the building settling. But when we shone a phone light that way, we saw him. It was Mr. Price, the janitor. He had been around the school for years, but no one really paid attention to him. He usually kept to himself, pushing his mop or unlocking doors. But here in the boiler room, he didn't look like the same man. His clothes were dirty, his face was streaked with grease, and his eyes were wide, like he hadn't slept in days. We asked what he was doing there. He didn't answer right away. He just stared, then muttered, "You shouldn't be here. This is my place." That's when it hit us. He had been living down there. The school must not have known. Or maybe they didn't care. He had a cot tucked in the corner, piles of canned food, and boxes of old uniforms. It looked like he had been there for a long time. At first, I felt bad for him. Maybe he lost his home. Maybe this was the only place he had left. But then his mood shifted. He started pacing, gripping a heavy wrench in his hand. His voice grew sharper, accusing us of sneaking in, spying on him, and planning to expose him. We tried to calm him, but paranoia had already set in. He slammed the boiler door shut, twisting a ring of keys on his belt. We were trapped. Every sound after that made me jump. He would disappear into the shadows of the basement, then reappear suddenly, standing too close, the wrench swinging lightly in his grip. He said things like, "You're not supposed to be here, and if they find me, it's because of you." We huddled together, whispering plans. One girl texted her mom, but the service was weak down there. Another guy tried to push the door, but it wouldn't budge. The janitor had locked every exit he knew about. The longer we stayed, the more he treated us like intruders in his home. At one point, he swung the wrench against a pipe, the loud clang making all of us flinch. Steam hissed from the crack, filling the room with heat. He grinned like he enjoyed seeing us panic. The real intruder, the one that caused the lockdown in the first place, was caught outside hours earlier. But we didn't know that. All we knew was that inside the school we were being hunted by someone who wasn't supposed to be there either. Finally, one of the boys in our group spotted a small maintenance hatch behind some boxes. It looked barely big enough to crawl through, but it might lead to the other side of the basement. While the janitor muttered to himself across the room, we quietly shoved the boxes aside. One by one, we squeezed through. The metal scraped my shoulders as I pulled myself forward, heart pounding the entire time. I kept expecting to feel the wrench slam against my back. When we crawled out, we ended up in a storage hallway. From there, we ran upstairs and finally found a police officer by the gym. They told us the intruder outside had been caught hours ago. The school was safe. Safe for everyone except us, who had just escaped something far stranger. Later, I overheard staff saying Mr. Price was taken into custody. They said he had been living in the basement for nearly 2 years, coming and going through service doors at night. The school board tried to keep it quiet, calling it a security issue. But for me, that basement will always be tied to the memory of his wild eyes and the sound of his wrench clanging against the pipes. Every time I hear about a lockdown drill now, I don't think about outside threats. My name is Dylan. I'm 30 years old now, but this story happened about 14 years ago when I was in grade 10. I was 16, then in what would become my final year of high school. At the time, I didn't think much of school. It often felt like a waste of years, and I just wanted it to be over. But one day that year turned into something I would never forget, because it was the first time in my life I experienced a real lockdown. My school was a decent size with close to 600 students in total. Each grade had around 100 kids split across several classes. The building itself wasn't fancy, just a standard high school with classrooms, a big round foyer with couches where students could hang out, and a few wide hallways. It was the kind of place where every day felt the same. You went to class, you saw the same faces, and nothing out of the ordinary really ever happened. In earlier grades, life felt simpler. In grade 7, we were just 13. Olds who didn't care about much. By grade 8, people started finding their groups of friends. In grade 9, things improved a bit because we had better teachers and more interesting subjects. But grade 10 was when everything shifted. People were getting older, louder, and more difficult. The teasing got worse, arguments broke out often, and the teachers were constantly frustrated. The head teacher, Mr. Stevenson, was a strict man who didn't tolerate nonsense. I remember one assembly when he shouted at the entire grade to stop acting immature and told the girls to end all the drama. Nobody laughed when he raised his voice. He was one of those teachers whom no one dared to mess with. I had only a few close friends I could rely on, maybe 2 or 3, and I mostly kept to myself. Some kids were polite and easy to talk to, but others were rude, loud, or just plain mean. I had already dealt with bullying in primary school, and I wasn't going to let it happen again. By that point in life, I stood up for myself whenever anyone pushed me. In the classroom, everyone had their own spot. Some groups sat together. The polite girls usually sat near the front, and I normally stayed by myself on a bench seat along the wall. My teacher, Mr. In, was strict but fair. He wasn't my favorite, but I didn't have issues with him either. It was just another normal day when the whole situation unfolded. That morning started like every other. By the second period, I was already bored, staring at the clock and waiting for lunch. Students were whispering, some were laughing, and others were zoned out. The room had its usual mix of noise and chatter. Nothing unusual. Then the PA system suddenly crackled to life with its three-tone chime. I barely paid attention at first. The principal often spoke over the system with announcements that nobody cared about, but this time his voice sounded more serious, even though he tried to keep it calm. Then I heard the words, "Code Black, lock all doors." My head snapped up. I turned to the code sheet pinned to the wall, and my stomach dropped when I read that Code Black meant a lockdown. For a moment, I thought it had to be a drill, but we had never practiced lockdowns before. Our school only did fire drills. Lockdowns were the kind of thing you heard about on the news, not something that happened in our quiet city. The mood in the classroom shifted instantly. Mr. Inez rushed to lock the door. He taped a large sheet of paper over the window and closed the curtains. The teachers outside hurried to lock the foyer doors and cover their windows, too. Within minutes, the building fell silent. Our classroom, once filled with chatter, became pitch black and so quiet that you could hear someone breathe across the room. At first, I felt calm. I wasn't easily scared, and I even tried to convince myself it was nothing. But as the silence stretched on, my thoughts started racing. Was there someone dangerous outside? Was it happening inside the school? Were we in real danger? I sat in the darkness, staring at the faint outlines of faces around me. Nobody looked terrified, but everyone seemed uneasy. The longer it went on, the more it got under my skin. The air in the room felt heavy, like you could cut it with a knife. The tiniest sound could make people flinch. I tried to focus my ears, listening for footsteps, voices, or any sign of forced entry. But there was nothing, just silence and the faint creak of chairs when someone shifted. I remember glancing around the classroom again and again. The boys at the far end whispered at one point, which broke the tension, but their voices annoyed me. The girls who normally giggled through every lesson were now sitting as quietly as statues. That struck me as strange, almost unsettling. It was like everyone's personalities had been erased by the darkness. Time dragged on. I don't know how long we sat there. Maybe half an hour, maybe longer. My nerves were fraying, even though I tried to stay calm. I leaned back against the wall, pretending like nothing was wrong. But inside, I was wondering what was happening beyond those doors. Finally, the announcement came through, all clear. The words lifted the weight off everyone in the room. The lights flicked back on. Mr. Innes uncovered the window and the door unlocked. Students stretched and whispered to each other, some laughing nervously. The silence that had felt like a heavy blanket was gone. When lunch came, the whole school buzzed with rumors. The story spread like wildfire. People said a student from our grade had pulled a knife on the principal. Nobody knew exactly why, but everyone agreed the principal wasn't hurt. The student, however, was expelled immediately. Hearing that sent a strange feeling through me. On one hand, I was relieved nothing worse had happened. On the other hand, it made the lockdown very real. This wasn't a drill, and it wasn't a misunderstanding. Someone had actually threatened the principal with a weapon inside our school. The rest of the day felt different. Even though the teachers tried to carry on like normal, everyone was distracted. The thought of how quickly things could have gone wrong hung in the air. Students laughed about it in the halls, some making jokes, others exaggerating the story. But I couldn't shake the memory of sitting in that dark classroom, waiting in silence, wondering if something terrible was about to happen. Looking back now, it still feels strange to think about how unprepared we were. We lived in a peaceful city where things like that didn't happen, at least not to us, But that day showed me how fast the ordinary can turn into the unexpected. One moment I was staring at the clock, waiting for lunch, and the next I was in total silence, holding my breath, hoping nothing was coming through the door. It was the only lockdown I ever went through in school, but it left a lasting impression. I can still picture the darkness of the classroom, the sound of the PA system, and the eerie quiet as dozens of students sat motionless, not knowing what was happening outside. Even now, so many years later, that memory hasn't faded.